Mr. Hogg, welcome to the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we start off with the housing crisis. As far as housing is concerned, your riding is one of the most expensive in Surrey. So if you are elected the MP for this riding, what would you do about the rising home prices?
Well, we've got a lot of challenges in all of Metro Vancouver, certainly including South Surrey White Rock. And we've had a large apartment for low-income housing that was approved by CMHC, and it was unfortunately turned down by the City of Surrey. So there has to be greater coordination and cooperation between the federal government, the provincial government, and local governments. As you're aware, local governments approve the buildings, and we need greater supply, and we want to have supply that meets the needs of people with lower incomes as well. So that facility that was turned down by the City of Surrey would have allowed for people on income assistance and with disabilities to pay 1/3 of their income towards their housing. So that is a significantly important step. We have one building like that already in South Surrey White Rock, which I had a role in getting approved, and we certainly need to have more of that. Australia has looked at some of their challenges, and they've actually gone to the point of saying that you have to be a Canadian citizen in order to purchase property.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we want to go to that point, but certainly all of those issues are being explored in terms of how can we make sure that we are a welcoming community, a welcoming Metro Vancouver that can support and encourage people from all different segments of society. We know that there's been some money laundering, and there's lots of research around that. We saw a house sell for $42 million in West Vancouver and paid for with cash. So there are significant roles that the federal government can play with respect to that part of it. The provincial government is actively involved in housing. They have a ministry for that, and local governments approve it. So there hasn't been enough coordination and cooperation as yet, and I'm hopeful that we can show greater cooperation and make sure that our housing is available to people with all levels of income. Just on the end of that, my son is a lawyer, and he can't afford to get a house, can't afford to buy a place here.
Oh, really?
And he's been concerned about that, and is talking about moving away, as many people are, because they can't afford to live here. Absolutely. And that would be tragic if we had so many, if we started to stratify our community that way.
Mr. Hogg, overdose crisis is a big issue as well. But I haven't heard any party leader talking about this. I was talking to Kerry Lynn Finlay before you, and she mentioned that Conservatives have promised $325 million to address this issue. What would you do to address this crisis?
I'm sorry, I missed the crisis. What was
overdose crisis? The overdose crisis, drug overdose.
Overdose, opioid crisis.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. That the whole opioid crisis, the province is actively, it is a provincial responsibility under healthcare, but the federal government has put a lot of money into that and is encouraged. In fact, the federal government, the Liberal government, approved the safe injection sites, and we were the first jurisdiction in Canada to have those and have continued to work on that. Whereas the Conservatives did not do anything when they were in power with respect to that. Their intent was to look at enforcement rather than treatment. So if they're talking about changing that somewhat, I think that's a positive move, and that's something that the Liberal government has been doing for some time. So we've actually led Canada with having our safe injection sites and places for treatment with people with all kinds of addictions, but particularly opioids. And there is some pilot projects that are being talked about in Vancouver where we're looking at the utilization of opioids and in some cases testing the legalization of them so that we won't have all of the fentanyl that's injected now in the opioids that are causing people's death. And where the death rate has been it's just been so horrendous over the last period of time. And that's primarily because we're seeing a lot of fentanyl injected in it. And we're seeing a lot of opioids coming offshore, injected with fentanyl, sold, and many wonderful people losing their lives over that with one shot. So those people who are addicted, the safe injection sites, we also have to do everything we can to ensure that either we've been trying for a number of years. All levels of government have been trying to prevent this death, trying to prevent fentanyl from coming in. One option that's being proposed by a number of doctors is that we look at the legalization of opioids at some level and see whether or not that, by providing it through government, then we're not going to have the fentanyl injections in that. Just putting more enforcement in has not worked and doesn't work anywhere in the world, and we've got to take a dramatically different approach to it if we're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Hogg, under Justin Trudeau's government, the previous government, the deficit, it has rose to billions and billions of dollars, right? Economic recovery is a major concern of all the Canadians right now. And how do we see that? How is this deficit going to reduce? And when is the Liberal government going to balance the books? Do we see average Canadian paying more for this, more taxes for this?
Well, I think we've been pretty clear in stating that there was a higher taxation rate placed on the 1% that earn the most money in Canada, and that has been to subsidize a greater income for our lower taxation rates for the middle income earners. In terms of a recovery, we've certainly, coming out of the opioid, and as you pointed out, there's been a lot of money put into it to ensure that our economy was still functioning. And if you look at our growth in GDP and the inflation rates, you can say that we've come out of this extremely well. And probably it's as big a crisis, or certainly as big a crisis as we faced since World War II. And if we're looking at inflation rates being at 2.5%, for every $1 million we spend now, it'll cost us 2.5% less each year to pay that off. So I think we should be spending more now. We should be spending all the money that we can, and that we will pay it back with dollars. If we could take it over 10 years, we'll be paying it over with dollars that are about 30% less than we're paying for dollars today. So if we wait and pay it off all at a later point in time, in terms of trying to get the economy going, we would be in far worse shape. So yes, we've been able to clearly manage the amount of debt that we've generated and the deficits associated with that, and we're on a trajectory to be able to pay that off. To say when will we pay it off, I think that's to some degree contingent on what we're facing. We're still not out of this pandemic. We still have challenges there. So to be able to set a deadline with respect to that would be foolhardy. We've got to make sure that we move forward and be able to respond to the needs of Canadian citizens each day, each week, each year. And if we're able to, when we're moving out of the pandemic, then we could be focusing more appropriately and accurately on what we have to do to pay back the debt. But to do that before we know exactly where we are and what we have to expend to ensure that people have jobs, have a place to live, have an income, and have food on their table, those are the most important things at this point.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to share your vision for the riding?
My vision?
Yes.
Oh, certainly. I would just I've lived in this community all of my life. My father was the first physician here. There's a hospital named partially after him, and I feel very blessed to have grown up in this community, to have been on council here, to have been the mayor for 10 years, to have represented this community as a member of the Legislative Assembly for 20 years, and be able to contribute in many ways to it. We have a number of issues that are important to this community. You've highlighted some of them. Mm-hmm. But today we've just looked at the issue of the coal trains that come from the United States through our riding and through Delta. And we've made a commitment to be able to stop those before, as quickly as we possibly can. We're taking American thermal coal, which is a dirty coal, they're not prepared to ship out of Washington or Oregon, and I don't believe we should be shipping them out of Canada as well. Mm-hmm. And so we have agreement from the Liberal government that they agree with that, and the plan is to eliminate that as quickly as possible, because we're shipping dirty coal that contribute to the global warming, which harms everywhere around the world. So we want to reduce that as quickly as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to say anything in closing, Mr. Hogg?
Only that I think that coming out of this pandemic, that it's a really important time for all of us to focus on the things that are important for supporting each other. We're a great multicultural, pluralistic society, and we have to honor and respect that and build on terms of that. And I think it's a crucial important time for citizens of our community, citizens of our country, to be speaking to the politicians, to be expressing their issues, their concerns, their visions, and their hope. And I trust that we'll be able to respond to those. And each party has a different perspective on that, a different way to manage it. I happen to believe that the values of the Liberal Party in terms of multiculturalism, pluralism, freedom of the individual are the most important way to go. And I also believe that the position that the Liberal Party has taken with respect to vaccinations is an important part of ensuring that we maintain and support the health of all Canadians.
Mr. Hogg, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and all the best for your campaigning.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.